welcome to the Digital CxO podcast. I'm Amanda Rosani, and with me again today is Mike Vizard. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, you recently wrote an article about Salesforce, and they have some new offerings in the AI space, especially with their Einstein AI. So what do we need to know about this?
Well, I think this is going to be a good example of what we're going to see across the board here when it comes to automating processes in the age of generative AI. So if you take a look back at what they've done is they have MuleSoft, which is an API integration platform, and then they have Salesforce, which is evolving into a set of SaaS applications that you can extend and build these various workflows around, and that's all good. And then the third piece is they have this Einstein platform, which is kind of an orchestration engine for accessing various AI models. Now, what all that means from a digital CxO perspective is historically, if I wanted to automate a process, I kind of had to go find somebody either to write the code at a low level, or I had to go find somebody who could write it at a higher level using a low-code, no-code tool. Now, if I wanted that to happen, I had to get the subject matter expert involved with the developer, and the two of them might come together and have something interesting in 3 to 4 months. And often it probably didn't look all that great and probably didn't scale, and there were probably security issues that had to be dealt with as well. As we evolve, you've seen the rise of prompts, and these are prompts in the context of a generative AI platform that just lets you write in natural text what you want the platform to do. And you fine tune it as the responses come in. But you can also start to think about this in ways where I can daisy chain a bunch of prompts together to automate a process. I can now connect the dots, and the LLMs are getting smarter and they have reasoning engines built into them. So we're going to have to figure out ultimately, how many processes can we automate just by letting the subject matter expert do that using the LLMs and natural language, versus how many are we going to actually need to go write some code for that requires a low-code tool or some other type of tool to go build that? And I think each digital CxO will need to figure out what's the right mix there. But my gut's telling me right now in the long term, it might be as much as 80% of the automations are just going to be recombining prompt libraries versus building and writing applications the way we used to.
Well, I would certainly think so, because you do also have to think about the skill set. And do you have the right people on your team that can type all that code out and understand the code that's necessary?
Yeah, and you make a good point, because arguably that's been holding us back. I can't get the subject matter experts to stop what they're doing, say, we'll work on this stuff, because then that's the other thing that they get paid for. So I don't have the people to sit down with the developers. And of course, the developers are expensive and hard to find as well. So if we can get to the point where more of the automations can be handled by the people actually running the processes, and they don't have to go find a developer to help them do that. And let's be honest, most of those people don't think the way machines think. But if I wanted to really boil things down to the brass level, we have been using software to interact with machines, and now the machines know how to interact with us. So it's a lot easier to go the lateral route than the former route. So I think what we see is more people will get comfortable in mastering these prompts. I don't think prompt engineering necessarily is a job, but I think we'll all develop these skills about how to connect these things together to automate something.
Absolutely. And I think everyone's playing around with prompt engineering. And on any day, I can look on LinkedIn and see someone else posting a whole bunch of engineering prompts that are out there shareable to use. So I don't know if we'll see that as a job in itself either.
Well, I'm hoping that there'll be a lot more things automated than ever, because my gut tells me that 90% of the things we could automate, we haven't, simply because we didn't have the time or energy or the resources.
Correct. So moving on, let's talk about health care, specifically digital tools and electronic health records. So the health industry in general is trying to digitalize a lot of data. And in this process, the customer tends to be on the short end of the stick, I would say, because they're having to enter in a lot of information over and over and over again. And, this best laid efforts of the healthcare facilities It's really not digitally transforming a process if you're having as the patient to constantly enter in your information every time you go somewhere. It's not connected. It's very difficult to access all these health records across the different healthcare facilities. So there's this this kind of a lack of understanding between digital transformation and just simply digitalizing. So what are your thoughts on this, and how do we solve this issue?
I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, and it seems like hopefully it's going to get better. And maybe this is a great place where we'll see some of those prompt libraries we were just talking about. But too much of what, if you go look at these healthcare apps, they kind of revolve around these electronic record systems. And they were built as systems of records. And if you're not familiar with SAPs, they're kind of like SAP systems for the healthcare sector, and they're not very flexible, and they're very monolithic, and they're not a lot of fun to work with. So I think a lot of the people who are put in front of these things just follow along or do the best they can. They're not really thinking about the customer experience. They're actually we've turned them into data entry junkies. And so I don't really blame those folks, because they're responding to the system that we built and designed, and the people who bought it never really thought through how it was going to be implemented on a day-to-day level, and it's a bit of a mess as a result. So I think we need to kind of look at the whole system, and I'm hopeful that, at least in this article, that some folks are going that route.
Yeah, so if you want more information about this issue, definitely check digitalcxo.com and read this article. It's share some information about how to handle this situation, and potentially harnessing AI could help. So next up, we haven't heard or spoken about this in a while, the metaverse. This was really like all the rage, maybe say a year or so ago, and then it kind of fizzled out. But now it's back in the spotlight a little bit more. It was never gone. But as AR and VR tools are becoming more accessible and a little less expensive, and more out there, companies are looking back at how can we harness the metaverse? What is the metaverse? They still don't quite all understand what it is, how to use it, what benefit is it going to give to their customers. But as this becomes more accessible, they're looking at it. So what are some of your thoughts?
I always thought that the business corollary of the metaverse is what we call a digital twin, right? And I think there are plenty of applications for people wearing glasses to create some sort of metaverse experience for training is a great example. And a lot of that can involve, essentially a digital twin of, I don't know, I'll pick an aircraft engine or something that we need to train somebody on. I think that's a huge opportunity. And I think that has been kind of rolled up into metaverse for businesses at work. And there's metaverse for consumers. And I don't know, I don't quite see that part yet, just because I don't think a lot of people want to wear these big clunky glasses just yet. I know there are some kids that will go play, and that's all fine. But even them, I notice they get tired because, wow, the gear starts to come down on the top of their nose, and it gets all red, and it's uncomfortable. And so I think we're a couple of generations away from making this, mainstream, but I think like most things, there'll be some steady growth as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. And those headsets can get really heavy. I was at a conference last week, and I went a couple of times to the VR sandbox gaming experience and played some different like dragon hunting and other games. And by the end, I was so sweaty and my face was so red and hot. But there are, people are looking into, some of the companies are looking into just regular glasses like what you're wearing that can give us that same, the same benefit, but on a much more comfortable scale. So who knows where the future lies with this. But the other question is the return on investment, and companies aren't really sure, cost wise, if it's going to be worth it or not. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I think Apple is probably at the forefront of this, along with Microsoft, who had that HoloLens for a while, but still has it. But they're going to drive that experience. Is going to get better and better over time. And as that becomes a better experience, then all this other stuff will open up.
Yep, absolutely. So next up, you wrote an article recently about DevOps and the network edge. So can you share with us a little bit more about this?
Normally, I wouldn't geek out too heavily on the digital CxO, but I know that all of you have encountered the following scenario. You build an application and it looks great, and then you start rolling it out, and suddenly some end user in, I don't know, Green Bay is not having a great experience, and yet everybody who's in New York or San Francisco is doing just fine. That's called the internet performance problem. And what happens is like there are so many layers of services on the internet, from CDNs and all kinds of stuff that we're using, that we don't have any visibility into what the actual end user experience is. And I think what I'm just pointing out here is we need to kind of meld up all this observability tools that we've been building out on the DevOps side, and all the stuff that goes into application performance management to make it effective and make it real. It's got to find its way out to what's actually happening on the endpoint itself and all those network layers in between, because otherwise it's just kind of theoretical. And the end customer looks at us and goes, I don't know what you guys are doing, but it doesn't sound like you know what you're doing, because my experiences are still awful. And what we don't really realize is, not every service is going to be delivered equally well across the global internet. And we need to figure out which ones are running where and prioritize some and maybe reroute others. And I think digital CxOs don't always get into that because they think it's a low-level IT thing. But I'm telling you, the difference between success and failure often comes down to this internet performance management stuff.
Certainly. And especially as we have more and more technology at the edge that more and more consumers are using. So we want to be able to deliver the best service.
You would think that would be the end goal. I think a lot of times we get caught up in the theory and not enough awareness of the practice. And a lot of times, even if something's working great and you think you're done, 2 weeks later, all hell is breaking loose because something changed on the internet services that you didn't see, and the carrier did something, and so you got to continuously stay on top of this stuff. And I think I would argue, one of the things that trips digital CxOs up most is this kind of like last mile performance issue to wherever the end user happens to be. And by the way, that end user is likely to move around anyway, because one day they're going to be traveling, and next week they're going to be in a cafe somewhere, and the other day they're at a friend's house, and it's all different networks and they have different experiences, and you kind of need to know what's happening with that. I'm hoping someday algorithms would take care of all this stuff and AI will make it all better, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon. So it's kind of up to the digital CxO to kind of work and understand what questions to ask the networking people, because they'll tell you the service is available. That doesn't mean it's a great experience.
Absolutely. And so now I want to turn and pivot a little bit. We've been talking about technology and all these great tools for automation and digital transformation. And we recently had a podcast interview with somebody sort of on the other side of this. His name was Vladimir Vatvatsy, and he was a little bit arguing against the technology and more for the human side of things, and saying that human creativity and human innovation and drive was going to be the winner in the end. So can you share a little bit about this, and then what are your thoughts?
It was a wide-ranging conversation, but we get a little enamored sometimes with the automation and not enough with what is the means to the end. And the thing about it is, so yes, I can automate all these marketing motions, but I wind up taking out the humanity of the interaction with the brand, especially, is his point. And so in his case, he was stressing the fact that it's critical for companies to have people who are representing them on these social media. You have to have somebody you're interacting with who you like and respect and who reflects your values. Otherwise, it's just, a constant barrage of unengaging content that just kind of says, look here, look at me, and lacks that little touch that makes people want to actually do something versus just kind of scrolling through it and looking at it as yet another advertisement that came over somehow or other and that they're trying to ignore. So that's what I got out of it. It was a great reminder. And I think sometimes we just think that, well, we're going to have digital avatars and they'll do all the pushing and all the content will come out and we'll just take that marketing motion all the way down to full automation. And I'm like, not quite. But that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, that human element is always important. We do say that. And these tools are great augmentation tools. And blending the two is what's going to ultimately be the winner.
So don't forget, people still matter.
That's right. Okay, well, thank you for tuning in with us again. And you know what? If you're watching this podcast, I haven't asked before, but feel free to comment, share your thoughts on our podcast discussions. And until next time, have a great week.
See y'all.